morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And how are we doing this morning?
Great.
And what about everybody else? Well, you know, Doug called for a knock-knock joke there. And I sort of have one. It's not in the traditional format, but it's extremely deep. So I invite you to take it in and just contemplate it for a little while. So, fear walked up and knocked on the door. Faith answered, there was no one there. Okay? So, it was really interesting, freedom, as the theme for the month, and the affirmation is, in my Christ self, I have freedom and dominion. And I like that affirmation, but you got to know it's easy to declare it, and it's only words. So you got to walk that talk if you want to get the benefit of the freedom that it's talking about. So my first 11 years into this teaching were extremely difficult because I had to go and create a whole new person. And as I was going along, finding my way, every now and again, I would get an inspirational point, and I'd work with it for a while, and I had this piece of paper in my wallet, and I wrote that point down. And after 11 years, I got that piece of paper out and laid it all like this, and I realized that there was a really good program there. And that program of 11 years, where I got my freedom from my past, I call self-sabotage. I was a prisoner of my own mind, because the greatest thing I had to try and find out is, why the hell did all this stuff happen to me? How come me? And what can I do about it? And the bottom line was, it was only because I was a prisoner of my own mind. So I want to talk to you a little bit and give you a few ideas to consider about how to free yourself from the prison of your own mind, because everybody has it. The reason I know that is because you're still here. Because if you didn't have that, you'd be such a highly evolved person that you'd probably move on to the next level. So I'll start out with a really neat quote I come across from the Science of Mind book by Dr. Ernest Holmes. And he said, the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is a birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express himself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a wonderful life in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, and of a freedom which the soul craves. So it's all about freedom. And you know, a lot of people think when you're taking away your freedom is if you're locked away in prison or something like that. That is absolutely not true. In fact, one of the greatest things I come across, and you may have heard this quote, but it was a guy by the name of Richard Lovelace. And he was a political activist with religious stuff in the 1600s, and he got put in jail for what he believed. And when he was in jail, he wrote a poem or a piece called To Althea from Prison. And he goes through the whole thing, and then he gets to the last section. And I'm going to read it to you because you may have heard this quote before, but this is really important because it's what it's all about. And keep in mind, this man's been in prison for a while, and this is what he wrote. Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. Minds innocent and quiet take, that for a hermitage. If I have freedom in my love, and in my soul am free, angels alone that soar above enjoy such liberty. So you see, he was free, even though he was incarcerated in prison. And you know, over the years of my study, I come across some pretty inspirational people that I read their work and respected a lot. And all of them have this common thing, is that they all found himself in prison. Anwar Sadat, anybody remember him, president of Egypt? He was considered to do more for peace in the Middle East than anybody has in 1,000 years. And his book, In Search of Identity, he talks about the revolution to break free from Britain and free Egypt. And he was in the army, and they caught him and they incarcerated him in prison in Cairo in solitary confinement. And he wrote in his book that basically, I'll paraphrase, that there in that quietness, he found himself. And he found the real meaning of life. And he got so wrapped up in it, when they let him go, he was a little bit upset with the fact that he was going to be released because of what he found there. Strange, huh? But that was what spurred him to go on and do the things that he did. Where did he get it? In prison. Another man that you know by the name of Nelson Mandela. 27 years. And a lot of those years were in absolutely horrible conditions. But you know, he never lost track of hope. He never lost track of his perspective. He never lost track of his goal. And then ultimately he was released and became the first black president of South Africa. And then another man that was really inspirational, his name was Viktor Frankl. Wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He spent 4 years, he was a Jewish psychiatrist, and spent 4 years in Auschwitz and survived that. You can imagine that. And the key thing that he wrote in that book was, basically he said they could torture me, they could starve me, they could beat me, they could control 100% the conditions and the experiences I was living in, but they cannot and could not take away the freedom that I had to choose how to respond to what was going on around me. And you see, that's the key thing that we forget. We all covet freedom. It's all available. And what the key is, we have the freedom to choose. No matter what, we have the freedom to choose how we're going to respond and deal with it. Might not be the way we like it, because we'd all like it to be wonderful. But we can choose how to position ourselves. And then people say, oh, I didn't have any choice. I don't have a choice. Anybody ever said that? That's the choice that you've made. Not to have any choice. You might not be able to manipulate and change circumstances and situations, but you do have the choice about how you're going to deal with it. And in that comes freedom. Freedom from the circumstance and situation. Freedom being centered in the Spirit and allowing yourself to be guided, directed, led to where you want to be, and inspired to where you want to go. So that's one of the basic freedoms we have, and we need to exercise that freedom. The next thing I wanted to talk about here is the freedom of speech. We have the choice to respond any way we want to with our speech. However, we must be aware that there are sometimes, in certain situations and circumstances, penalties that will be inflicted upon us. But we all have that freedom to choose, and we all have that freedom of speech. Anybody ever say something before they thought about it and got themselves in a lot of trouble and had to do damage control?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I did a lot of that in my day. I mean, a whole lot. And so I had this thing I come across, I wrote, and I had it on my wall for about 25 years. I worked on it because I needed it. I'm a little bit of a slow learner in some ways. Then I stopped and had come back again, so I have to keep it there real close. But what it is, one must remember, it's easy to say the right thing all the time. The trick is to resist saying the wrong thing at the tempting moment. And I'm doing really good at that. Almost all the time. But every now and again, that starts going before this gets into gear. And then I'm on damage control. And so, the freedom the freedom comes with, well, how does it come? It comes with awareness and forgiveness. That's the road to freedom. And through awareness, we can just pause before we do something. I remember I made a commitment to nonviolence in 1980. That might not be a big deal for anybody else, but my whole 17 years before that was checkered with crime, violence, gangs, all that kind of stuff. So I made that commitment, and I did real well with it, except for once. But I remember being at a football game after making this commitment, and we get some words with somebody behind me, and they pulled my hair, and I turned around and had him by the throat, and I'm standing over him, and I'm going, "But Doug, you said you were going to deal with this differently." I didn't want to deal with it differently, but I made the commitment, and through awareness, because before I wouldn't even have stopped to do that, it would have been done. You know what I'm saying? But I did that, and then I let go of my clutch and went and dealt with it in a different way. Because I wanted to show my children and grandchildren how to do it, not tell them what to do. And I was doing that with my grandson at a hockey game, somebody being obnoxious sitting in my seat. And rather than dealing with it myself, I went and got the appropriate authorities to do it. So I'm feeling pretty good about that, And it takes time, but it's only through awareness. And the only way that you get the awareness is to realize where you're being stupid and not want to be stupid anymore. And then it comes. Not right away, but a bit at a time. It's with practice. And then forgiveness. Oh my. You cannot be free if you hold any grudges, resentments, prejudice, hatreds, or animosities towards anybody or anything. You can't be free. Because is that stuff good energy? Is that God's energy? No. So if you carry that stuff inside of you, then it clogs up the passageway and nothing can flow. You know that thing we just had here with the big water pipe bursting and the water not being able to flow? Well, we have two kinds of pipes like that in the city. We have that, which is water, which, it broke and there isn't, but it was a clean flow basically through their water. Then you got this other big pipe. It's called sewage. It's not so clean. And when that pipe breaks in our life, what happens? It gets real cloudy. So we've got to be really, really careful. I come across another little thing on this, and I'm sure most of us know about it, but it was a song and a particular chorus of the song written by Ricky Byers Beckwith. And it's called "I Release and I Let Go." Anybody know that song? And she writes, "I release and I let go, and I let the Spirit run my life." Notice the release and the let go. My heart is open wide. Yes, it's only up to God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. And I am free in the Spirit. Yes, it's only up to God. Excellent song. And it's so true. I love that because that's what it's all about. It's all about release and letting go of anything that isn't really the truth. It's the false truth, but not the real truth. And so the biggest challenge of all of that, it's a lot easier to deal with everybody and everything out there. Where we really need to do the work, where the biggest obstruction happens, is in here. We have to learn to forgive ourselves. I had a real tacky background, and people said to me quite often, "Oh, don't you feel bad about what you did? Don't you feel a little guilty about doing all that kind of stuff?" Well, you know what, folks? The nice thing about doing so much bad stuff is that the only way you can survive is learning to forgive yourself and not do it again. You can't change the past. Would anybody here like to change something from the past? Just one or two little things. Notice that you can't do that. Because life doesn't work that way. It moves forward. So what we need to do is we need to forgive ourselves and to forgive and let go of that which is inside of us that caused us to be able to do it that way rather than do it a new way. Okay? And it sounds easy, but it's not. You know that. It just takes time and willingness. How long? Well, I don't know for sure because I'm still working at it a little bit here and there. Nobody gets it all, but we just do get better. I mean, my life's a way better now than what it was. Oh, all kinds of wonderful experiences. And then there's the self-imposed prison. I can't. If only. I'd like to, but. You ever hear someone, I'd like to, but? Sounds great, wonderful, but. Well, if only this would happen, you know, the ifs and buts. If ifs and buts for candies and nuts, I guess it'd be time for Christmas. Remember that one, okay? Someday, how about that one? Someday. And then at the end of the line you get down and it changes to, I wish I would have. Gave a class an exercise once to write a 25-word statement about how they'd like to be remembered and what people would say about them when they passed. Not what they'd like to, but what the people would say about them. Right? And set that out and then just live it. And mine is, I want to live so I won't be in a position that said, I wish I would have. So anything's on the list, whatever it is or how weird, I do it. And if I'm not going to really do it, I don't put it on the list. One must cleanse that inner vessel. And part of that means on a regular basis, not entertaining a whole lot of negativity, releasing worry, doubt, pessimism, fear, and here's a big one, conditional living. I'll be okay when that happens. Oh, I'd be so happy when this happens. I'll be happy. Anybody going to be happy later? If you're going to be happy later, bad news, it ain't going to work because you'll never be happy later. Because you can't be. You can only be happy now. And you can only be happy inside of yourself. You can lose your happiness too. Remember when they had COVID there and they had that groups of people that could only be 6 and no more? Well, the 7 dwarfs had a problem because there were 7 of them. So when they got to that, one of them wasn't happy. I'm sorry. I really just had to do that one, okay? So, you know, it's all about the journey. And we're always on a journey, and we're always going places. And you know, the greatest thing about working with this over the years is now, along the way, I get inspired by Spirit. I get guided, led, directed, and inspired. And you know, the second thing is, I actually listen to it. And do it. And over the period of time, things just keep getting better. But do I ever run into any issues? Yes. We just got to keep going forward. It happens to us. And I'm going to leave you with one caution here. It's watch out for spiritual constipation. And that's blocking the flow through you. And one of the ways people do it when they want to be, that are in this, that are spiritual, that do it, to deny it when people say, well, how's it going? Oh, I'm going with the flow. Have you ever heard, you probably use that yourself. Anybody ever use that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you ever heard that? And you ever heard that? You know that's not true? And when people say that to me, I a lot of times I'll respond to them. I say, well, be real careful, you know. What flow are you in? Because both the river and the sewer flow. Because sometimes we're smart and we use our spiritual wisdom and knowledge to create resistance and ways to avoid what it is that we need to do in order to cleanse that channel, to be more spiritually guided, led, and directed. Because you know our divine birthright, if you want to get it down to the point, is we all deserve peace, prosperity, fulfillment, and happiness. That's our divine birthright, or else we wouldn't be here and have the ability to claim that. And so this is not an egotistical thing, because when one understands and claims that, then what you have is a greater abundance of things and a greater abundance of yourself to share with people. I used to share myself 40 years ago with people in a way they didn't like my sharing. And now they do. I'll save that story for another day, because I'm going to Penticton, that brought up something, but that's a different one. Anyhow, that's just the way it works. So I know for you, as I know for myself, that I am divinely guided, led, directed, and inspired to right action at all times, and that I richly deserve and inherit peace, prosperity, fulfillment, and happiness in my life, and so it is.
And so it is.
So it is.
Thank you.